It's planting season. Time to get your flowers, vegetables, even your trees and shrubs in the ground. Welcome to the Wisconsin Gardener. I'm your host, Shelley Ryan. On this edition of the Wisconsin Gardener, we'll show you how to plant, and we'll give you some ideas as to what to plant. For instance, early blooming shrubs like this forsythia add great color to a spring landscape. This variety is called Sunrise, and its winter hardiness and small size make it a great choice for Wisconsin gardeners. We'll talk more about spring blooming landscape plants later in the program. But first up, a look at some award-winning flowers for your backyard. That's next on the Wisconsin Gardener.
Major funding for the production of the Wisconsin Gardener has been provided by Jung Seed and Nursery Company with garden centers in Randolph, Stevens Point, Madison, and Sun Prairie, and Fiskars, a Wisconsin manufacturer of ergonomic cutting tools for the home and garden, distributed worldwide.
Every year, hundreds of new and improved plant varieties are introduced on the market. It's hard to know what's going to work in your own backyard. Here's a way to make your decision a little easier. We're at the Trial Gardens here at Berner Botanical Gardens, and I'm with horticulturist Lori Yanni. Lori is also one of the All-America selection judges. Lori, can you explain what it means to be judging for the All-America selections?
Well, our garden has taken part in the All-America program since 1967, and we're just one of 33 different trial sites located all over the U.S. and also in Canada. Every year we receive seed of new varieties that aren't named and they aren't on the market, and we grow them in our gardens and we evaluate them under our conditions. So some of the things I look at as a judge include the neatness of the plant habit, whether something starts flowering early and continues flowering late. I also look at disease resistance and sometimes insect problems.
And so then you pick winners.
Yeah, the winners are picked on the basis of scores from all of the judges, and we display the All-America winners in this bed here, the All-America Winner Display Garden.
So any of these would be really good choices for a backyard. What about this petunia right here? The color, it's a fuchsia, it's stunning.
This is Petunia Purple Wave, and it really has a quite different habit from the other petunias that are on the market. It grows almost like a carpet, and it covers the ground. It also has excellent flowering, and it rebounds and flowers after rain. A lot of times petunias don't recover well when we have a thunderstorm. It takes them maybe 3 or 4 days or sometimes even a week to come out of other rain damage. This plant also flowers late into the year because it has a little bit of tolerance to light frost.
Oh, wow. So it's going to be around after the frost then.
Yeah, we'll even have some flowering in September and October.
And this is a 1995 winner?
Yes.
All right, what about these more delicate purple flowers here?
This is Verbena Imagination, and it won an award in 1993. It's a different type of verbena. It has this ferny kind of foliage, and it also has something that's a positive virtue in that it flowers late into the season and it flowers continuously. Regular verbena that we have in our garden a lot of times goes to seed, and you have long periods where there's hardly a flower on it at all.
So I don't have to deadhead this or trim it or anything to keep this color all summer?
No, it's a very carefree plant.
That's perfect for my backyard then. Now you told me earlier that this is a salvia, and it doesn't look like any of the salvias I've ever grown.
This is Salvia Lady in Red, and it won an award in 1992. The flowers are really different from the stiff kind of formal flowers that you see on the regular garden salvia.
Really pretty.
These are very airy in appearance. The thing I like about this plant is that it attracts hummingbirds.
Oh, wonderful.
It also attracts goldfinch, and they aren't really interested in the flowers. They're after the seed. They enjoy plucking the seed out of the capsules.
So put this somewhere where I can enjoy watching the wildlife come to it. Now, red is an important part of the garden. This zinnia proves my point. It's just glowing. This is also an award winner?
Yeah, this is Zinnia Scarlet Splendor, and it won an award in 1990. So it's one of the older winners in our flower display here, but it really is one of the better varieties that we've had on our gardens.
Well, it's a real showstopper. Now, are we looking at 1 year of growth in this garden?
Yes, all the plants in this winter's bed are in their first summer. So there are things in here that perhaps might overwinter in a tropical climate, and there are a few things in here that might overwinter in a climate such as Wisconsin's, but all of them can be used as an annual for just one first flowering season.
Well, okay, the black-eyed Susan, for instance, I always think of as a perennial, and yet this is the flowers from the first year of growth?
Yes, this is Rudbeckia Indian Summer, and it's a 1995 winner.
Beautiful.
It really didn't overwinter very well in our trials last year. We had kind of a hard winter, but with bloom like this the first season, you really can't complain.
No.
The flowers on it are just immense, and they have very strong stems, so they don't require staking, and they can be used in the inside for flower arrangements too.
All right, what about the delicate pink flowers in front of you, the cannas right here?
This is Canna Tropical Rose, and it won an award in 1992. And it has this lovely soft color, but it also has this really dramatic foliage. And a lot of times we don't pay very much attention to foliage in the garden. You see these planted oftentimes on the boulevard. Some people have nicknamed them boulevard bananas.
They look like a banana leaf. Those are great. Well, let's look at one last award winner then. This is a lavender.
This is Lavender Lady, and it's a 1994 award winner. And this is the flowering that you get on it for the first season.
Oh, really?
And we have a problem growing lavender in Wisconsin.
Yes, we do.
The old seed-grown varieties don't bloom very much, if at all, the first season. And then when you try to overwinter them, Wisconsin's winters being what they are, a lot of times you lose the plant completely, so you have zero for your efforts. So this really does provide a nice display.
And it's still got that beautiful scent of the lavenders.
Yes, it's very fragrant.
Very nice. Thank you, Lori. So if you're looking for some new ideas for your backyard, come visit the trial gardens here at Bernard Botanical Gardens. You're sure to find a winner. Here's Verbena Imagination again. We showed you what it looked like after it's been in the ground a couple months. Now we'll show you how to properly put it in the ground. I'm with Master Gardener Doris Kistler in her Middleton garden, and we're going to plant annuals. Doris, how do you use annuals in your yard here?
Shelley, I love annuals. I use them in containers on the decks and porches, and I use them in perennial borders to add a splash of color. For example, right here, we have a shrub border, and I can use annuals to change the color from one year to the next.
Oh, sure. Well, how do we start?
Okay. What we have here, I've already dug the hole, and we have very clay soil. So what I like to do is to add a little compost and peat mixture to give the plant an environment that's a little more conducive to strong root growth.
It's kind of hard to grow through solid clay.
Right, that's right. So we'll just
So this is good organic
here.
material.
Exactly.
All right, and then we have to take the plant out of the cell pack.
Yes, and we want to do this very carefully. These things are still tender and young, so I just put it in my hand and gently tap on the bottom.
Now, you don't grab it by the stem or the leaves and yank it out.
No, we want to be careful with it. Now, you'll notice that the roots are starting to circle on this one. This is not what we call being badly root bound, but it is a little root bound.
It's getting there.
So I would just very carefully loosen the roots a little.
So that they'll grow out instead of in a circle.
Yes, because if we put it in the hole like this, and it's going to continue to circle around, and we won't have a strong, beautiful plant.
Okay.
So I'm going to put it in the hole at about the same level that it was in the pot.
And then pull the soil in around it.
Yes.
And you're going to use the good soil for this.
I'm going to use the good soil.
Okay, so you just kind of gently nestle it. Now, do you push real hard, or do you just gently firm it in there?
Well, once I get all my soil in, I am going to tamp it down.
A little bit, but that's step on it.
Yes, because we want the roots to make contact.
Okay. And then do you pull this mulch you've got around here back over it?
Yes, that helps conserve the moisture.
And keep weeds down, too.
It certainly does.
It's been kind of wet today. Would you water this?
Yes, because the soil that we added in was very dry. So I will water it today and water it for the next few days if it doesn't rain.
Just to get it established.
Yes.
And then we'll just repeat this pattern throughout this bed.
Certainly.
Great. Thanks, Doris. Next up, some plants you may not want to find in your garden. It's a great time of year to be planting in your garden. It's also a good time of year to start being on the lookout for some plants you may not want in your garden. I'm with UW-Madison horticulture professor Herb Hopen, and we're at Arlington Horticulture Research Farm to take a closer look at weeds. Herb, earlier you mentioned that we were going to talk about annual weeds. Let's start out with a definition of what those are.
An annual weed would be a weed that the seed would germinate, and the plant that germinates from would complete its life cycle during one growing season.
So from seed to seed in the entire year?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
And what weeds are we going to talk about?
Well, there are many weeds that are a problem in a small
Yes.
home garden, but we're going to talk about two today. One is Galensoga, and the other is common purslane.
And they're both annuals that are problems in Wisconsin.
That's correct.
All right, let's start out with the Galensoga. Now, I think I actually recognize this one.
This is Galensoga. It has the yellow and white flowers, as you can see.
And hairy stem.
Hairy stem is one of the determining characteristics of Galensoga.
Okay. And how is it a problem?
It's a problem because the plant, the seed that drops from the plant, really doesn't have any dormancy. You can see on this plant that there are flowers, and there's also mature seed here. When this seed drops on the soil, it can germinate immediately, and once you have the start of this problem, it can rapidly explode and become a serious problem in a short time.
So we don't want to wait till it's this large to deal with it.
Probably best to control Galensoga when it's in a young stage, the seedling stage. And this is a seedling of Galensoga, and this would be the correct time, or slightly larger than this, to control it.
Okay. And now I know that one of the problems is that these compete with sunlight with my plants. Are there other ways that this is actually a problem for my vegetable crops?
Would compete for moisture and nutrients would be the primary problem that these plants would cause.
Okay. Once we've identified it in the young stage, then what is the best way to control it?
Probably the best way to control it is the use of cultivation and hoeing, mechanical removal, and combining this with mulching. A mulch will exclude the light from the young seedlings and will cause them to die as young seedlings.
Okay, so mulch and then physically get them out of the garden when they're young before they've reseeded.
Right.
Okay. And what about herbicides for something like this?
As you have an individual patch of, let's say, tomatoes, then herbicides, if you choose to use herbicides, are an option. But in a small home garden, we're talking about selective herbicides, and this is not the best choice because you will harm one plant that you're trying to grow and not harm the other.
Okay, so physically just pull this stuff out is the best solution.
Correct.
All right, what about this one here? Now again, I recognize this. I have a lot of it in my garden.
Again, a common problem for home gardeners. This is common purslane, and we start to see this weed showing up the middle part of the growing season. It requires a high soil temperature for the seed to germinate, so during the middle part of the season when we start to see this common purslane.
And it competes with most of the crops in my garden?
Again, it doesn't like low light levels. So if we have shade, it's not a problem. But if we have a crop like onions, let's say, that doesn't have a dense foliage,
or beets or something,
or beets, then it would be a problem in high light levels.
Okay, now again here we've got a mature plant. These are the young ones here. That's the best time to start worrying about getting it out of there.
Again, any weed, it's best to control it at a young stage. But if we do control this weed by cutting it off, we need to get the weed out of the garden area. Because if you cut the weed off, and let's say you cut it in several pieces, it will reroot itself. So remove it from the garden or you'll have several weeds.
So don't leave any pieces behind when we hand hoe this.
That's correct.
So you're saying again, hand hoeing and mulch are the best solution for purslane as well?
For all of the weeds in a small garden. Right.
All right. You said there was another method for purslane that didn't involve our activity at all.
Right. We have a naturally occurring insect, and this is the purslane sawfly, and this plant has the purslane sawfly in it. It's a leaf miner, and it's an insect that feeds only on purslane, so it's a very selective control. But it is very sensitive to pesticides. But if you're an organic gardener and you see this insect working your purslane,
and you get those
leave
kind
it
of
alone,
black
and
marks,
it'll control the weed.
and we can just sit back and enjoy it then.
Correct.
Great. Thanks, Herb. So physical control is the best way to deal with weeds like these. But coming up next, when is a weed not a weed? Sometimes weeds like these are not only good in your salad, they're good for you too. We just showed you how weeds can be a problem in the garden. There are also some surprising benefits to them. I'm with UW Extension horticulturist Dr. Astrid Nieuwenhuis, and we're in her father's garden in Gotham in southwestern Wisconsin. Astrid, before we talk about the benefits of weeds, I have to ask you, how did your father feel when we asked him to let us use the weeds in his garden?
It was really funny to ask him if he would please stop weeding so that we could come in and eat the weeds.
A little bit painful, I imagine. Well, what are the benefits to weeds, to eating weeds?
Well, the 3 weeds that we'll eat today are full of vitamin A, vitamin C, iron, and calcium.
So they're good for us, too.
They're good for us. They're available. They're free.
That's true. Well, and I recognize one we just finished talking about is the wild common purslane right there. That's the stuff on the ground?
Yes, that's the common purslane. And there also is a cultivated, imagine this, a cultivated weed, a cultivated variety of purslane.
So the one in the pot is actually grown on purpose?
Yes. And purslane has been used for centuries in China, Mexico. Eat it, go right ahead. China, Mexico, and India.
It has a lemony, citrusy flavor.
Mildly acid, and it's really crisp.
Yeah, texture to it. So it's eaten raw in these other countries?
Yes, it's eaten raw. It can also be cooked. You can take the young shoot, the stem, cook it like you would a vegetable. You could stir fry it. You can even pickle purslane.
Oh, really? Now is this something that, if this is a cultivated variety, that means we're starting to realize we can actually grow this and eat it too, or use the wild?
Yes, you get the same benefits from the wild purslane in your garden or this cultivated variety.
Okay. Now what about the dandelions? I've always heard that they were used for edibility, but how do we do that?
Well, here's a young dandelion, and that's the stage at which you want to eat the leaf.
When it's a real baby.
Very tiny. Here we've already dug some up. There's 2 things you can do here. You can eat the young leaf. Try that.
Now that's more bitter.
Bitter.
These two, the purslane and the dandelion, would be nice combined in a salad together. You have a contrast of flavors.
Yes, and mixed salad greens are really popular now.
Yeah, that's true.
So you can eat the young leaf, or you can cut the root and cut the leaf off and eat this white or blanched part as you would radicchio or endive.
Well, those are very popular right now, too.
Yeah, and dandelion tastes just like that.
Oh, okay. Now, I know with the purslane that it really can be eaten throughout its growing season, and in fact, during the hotter weather, it's great when a lot of our other lettuces are getting too bolted. Is there a cutoff point for dandelions?
Yes, there is. As soon as you see the flower bud on a dandelion, don't eat it. Don't eat the leaf when you see the flower bud, because the leaf becomes bitter.
Not so tasty anymore.
This one here is too huge.
Well, now I know the flowers have been used to make dandelion wine, too.
Right.
So it's got a lot of uses. Now, that was deliberately brought into this country as an edible green?
It was brought in as a drug. The root has medicinal properties. In fact, it's still listed as a drug in the U.S.
Okay. What about the lamb's quarters?
Here's lamb's quarter. It's another common garden weed. You can identify it by its beautiful green color and the shape of that leaf, and also by this gray powder on
Almost
the
looks
young
dusty.
shoot. Yes.
And how do we eat this one?
Lamb's quarter, you'll want to eat the leaf and the shoot exactly as you would spinach.
So again, raw in a salad?
You could eat it raw. I prefer it cooked, steamed, like I would eat spinach. And it has a richer, more full-bodied flavor than spinach. It's really great. It's one of my favorites.
You like it better than spinach?
Absolutely.
Is there a cutoff point for harvesting this?
Are you talking about my 6-foot lamb's quarter that I have in my
I was
garden?
actually thinking about mine.
When your lamb's quarter gets to be too tall, meaning
6 feet.
more than 10 inches, you can still eat the young shoots that come off from the main stalk, and you can eat the very top.
So the young tender parts again is what we
Yes.
stick to. Well, you seem to be very much into eating weeds. How did you get into this?
Oh, I love eating weeds. For me, looking around the environment and identifying the plants and being able to then carry those plants to my table and eating them is a way to appreciate the cycles of nature and the variety that's found in the plant kingdom.
And maybe really zip up a salad too. I see 2 problems. I would be worried about a beginner going out and eating something that might have been sprayed.
Right. Stay away from anything you think may have been sprayed. If you don't know, don't eat it.
So maybe stick to your own backyard at first.
Good idea.
The other concern is proper identification. You don't want somebody eating the wrong thing.
Absolutely. Stick with plants that you know, for example, the dandelion, or if you don't know, spend a great deal of time learning identification. What I have found useful are books, and here's a good one, The Handbook of Edible Weeds by James Duke.
Okay, so something like this is a good companion when we're starting to get into this.
Right.
Okay, great. Thanks, Astrid. So if you can't beat them, eat them. Beautiful, isn't it? We're at the UW-Madison Arboretum to look at some spring blooming landscape plants. I'm with Dr. Ed Hasselkus, Emeritus Professor of Horticulture and Curator here at the Longenecker Gardens. Ed, you said we're going to look at some plants with all-season interest. This is gorgeous right now. What is this?
This is Manchu cherry, Prunus tomentosa. One of the earliest blooming of the prunus are flowering plums and cherries. And so before the leaves are even beginning to develop to any degree.
And how hardy is it here in Wisconsin?
Hardy anywhere in the state of Wisconsin.
Wonderful.
And it ultimately achieves a height of maybe 5 to 8 feet.
And you said earlier it was drought tolerant as well, was that?
Very, very tolerant of drought, and just so the soil is well drained.
So we can put it just about anywhere.
Yes.
Sun, shade?
Preferably full sun, although
Okay.
a little bit of shade is okay.
Now, you said this has interest more than just in spring. How so?
In addition to the flowers, there are red fruits.
Oh.
They taste like Door County cherries.
People can eat them then?
Yes, they're about a quarter the size, though, of the Door County variety in about July. And then in winter, there is some bark interest, which isn't too easy to see just now, this sort of mahogany bark exfoliating and peeling.
Well, now the fruit interests me. Do I have to do anything special to get fruit?
Now, that's a good point. It is self-sterile, so you need more than one plant to assure fruit production.
At least 2 or 3,
2 or
something
3.
like that.
Be
these,
lavish.
These would be beautiful in the yard anyhow.
Yes.
Now, I noticed you still have a cage on this one. Why is that?
The hardware cloth here is to protect it from rabbits. Now,
Aha.
generally speaking, prunus is very attractive to rabbits, and so we leave this in place year-round. Otherwise, the plant would be decimated.
So that bark that's attractive to us in the winter is attractive to the bunnies too.
Way too much.
Okay, what should we look at next?
Let's look at a broadleaf evergreen.
Now, this is a beautiful shrub. This is a rhododendron, right?
Shelley, this is Madison snow rhododendron. It was actually selected and introduced by an amateur gardener here in Madison.
Oh, wonderful.
And of course, we always have to worry about hardiness. This one has fully hardy flower buds. And actually, the American Rhododendron Society rates rhododendrons and azaleas for hardiness. An H1 is the one we want for our area.
For most of Wisconsin, make sure you're getting an H1 or you won't get flowers.
That's correct.
You'll just get beautiful evergreen leaves.
Yes.
And now, are we looking at the mature height of this?
This is about a 20-year-old plant, and I should judge it to be 3 feet in height. So a nice intermediate-sized shrub.
Okay. And do we have to worry about soil preparation because it's a rhododendron?
Rhododendrons and azaleas are acid soil requiring plants, and the best way to achieve that is to mix peat moss into the soil at planting time and granular sulfur. So I'd suggest spreading about 4 inches of peat moss in the planting area, liberally sprinkle sulfur into that, work that into the soil.
How deep do we have
about
to work
a shovel's depth.
Oh, okay.
And they're fibrous rooted, very easily transplanted.
All right. Now, also full sun, shade, we're in kind of a shady spot.
We're in about half shade here, and so let's say they're tolerant of half shade, and preferably an eastern exposure, where they're not exposed to the hot afternoon sun.
And some of the tough winds in the winter, too.
Yes.
All right. Well, this is a nice scale for a small yard, but you said we were also going to look at something a lot bigger.
All right, Shelley.
Now, Ed, this is a much more formal spring blooming shrub than any of the other ones we've seen today.
Yes, and it has this ascending upright branching habit. Shelley, this is the Golden Glory Cornelian cherry dogwood.
It's beautiful, and it's massive.
Yes, I would say about 20 feet tall.
That's the mature height, what we're looking at there?
Yes, and, and this would be about the mature spread as well. Now, obviously, the flowers are the major feature here.
They're beautiful.
Early spring, usually along with forsythia. However, it's one of those plants like the rhododendron, where in severe winters, the flower buds may be injured or killed. And so after 25, 27 below, we may not have too many flowers to look at.
Okay, so maybe southern Wisconsin a little safer.
Yes, I would agree.
Okay.
And if the flowers survive, we can look forward to edible fruits.
Edible for people again, or birds?
Edible and birds. In this case, the reason it's called cornelian cherry is that it has somewhat elongated, very bright red fruits. One of the few edible fruit producing dogwoods, actually.
Well, and at this height, I can share. The birds can have the upper half and I get the lower half.
Yes. Now, this cultivar Golden Glory was also selected on the basis of really dark green foliage. So all around, it's a wonderful plant, either sun or shade.
Oh, so it can handle, it's tolerant of shade then?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ed. Longenecker Gardens houses one of the largest collections of ornamental landscape plants in the Midwest. If you're looking for ideas for your backyard, it's a great place to come and visit. Trees and shrubs like this flowering plum can handle a little cold weather, but be careful when planting out flowers and vegetables. Ask your county extension agent for the last average frost date in your area. Be sure to plant out tender annuals and perennials after that date. Even then, be on the lookout for late spring cold snaps. After all, this is Wisconsin. And thanks for joining me on the Wisconsin Gardener.
Major funding for the production of The Wisconsin Gardener has been provided by Jung Seed and Nursery Company with garden centers in Randolph, Stevens Point, Madison, and Sun Prairie, and Fiskars, a Wisconsin manufacturer of ergonomic cutting tools for the home and garden, distributed worldwide. For a free one-year subscription to the Wisconsin Gardener's quarterly newsletter, write to the Wisconsin Gardener Notebook, Wisconsin Public Television, 821 University Avenue, Madison, Wisconsin, 53706.